Our next session is Sounding Board, and the topic is Evaluating the State of Trade and Connectivity in South and East Asia. And for this session, we are honored to have Mr. Masud bin Momen, Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Bhardwaj, Professor of South Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. And the session will be moderated by Dr. Mustafizur Rahman, Distinguished Fellow, Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh. I would like to request all the panelists to come on the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dear audience, first of all, let me register my deep appreciation of all of your presence. After lunch sessions are always very difficult. We all understand that. But hopefully, we have two eminent personalities with us who will keep you awake. I can guarantee you that. So thank you for your presence. Our session will be on evaluating the state of trade and connectivity in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, ASEAN, so in the region. And to discuss this very important issue, we have with us two very, I think, very appropriate panelists. On my right hand is our Foreign Secretary, Mr. Masud bin Momen. You all know him. He has been our Foreign Secretary since 2019, a very challenging time when he took over the responsibility, and now also steering our country's foreign policy, helping the government, navigating all the developments that are happening in the region and globally. And before that, he was also our permanent representative in UN mission. And we are very happy to have you, Foreign Secretary, with us. We have also with us a very eminent scholar, Mr. Professor Sanjay Kumar Bhardwaj is known in our circle as a prolific writer, scholar. He has written a lot on regional and sub-regional issues, which is the focus of our discussion today. Now he's professor at Center for South Asian Studies at JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he was also, I think, you have been also heading it between 2018 and 2020, is it? Yeah. And he has also written on a number of issues, water issues, energy security, trade, investment, and his book on also, there is a book on Bangladesh, I think on the Bangladesh political identity and Indian perspective on that. So between them, I think that we will have a very lively discussion, and I hope that we will also have some time for your participation and interventions and any question that you might have. Now, the state of trade and connectivity, and I would like to also add not only trade connectivity and transport connectivity, but also investment connectivity, people-to-people connectivity in the region is so important as we go forward in the 21st century. We call it 21st century is Asian century, but if we look at Bangladesh's export, for example, only 12% of the export is in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. So that is something that, that is of importance for us in going forward, because if as Bangladesh we want to take advantage of the Asian century, I think that we need to deepen our various connectivities in the region, so that we can make best use of the comparative advantages that we have in order to translate those comparative advantages into competitive advantages and get into the regional markets of goods and services. I think that for Bangladesh, this is becoming very important. As I mentioned, I saw the data that in 2010, our exports to these three regions was 10%, now it is only 12%, which means that we are really missing out. So how we can deepen the connectivities, that is very important, and that is what we will look forward to hear from our two panelists. I think that a number of initiatives are being taken by Bangladesh also in the region under the line of credits. Bangladesh is undertaking a number of infrastructure projects which hopefully will deepen our connectivity with India, with the region. And also India is building the trilateral highway. We also have the Belt and Road Initiative in the region, the ASEAN multi-sectoral various initiatives in transport and connectivity. We also have the SAFTA. Obviously, we do have our own, skepticism with regard to how effective it has been. But I think that there are also potentialities over there. We are also members of BIMSTEC free trade agreement, but unfortunately the BIMSTEC FTA, which was supposed to be in both goods and services, has also not taken off, and we are still, the framework agreement was signed in 2004, and we are still discussing, and we don't have the free trade agreement. But the world is, moving forward. We also have seen in recent times the Indo-Pacific Partnership Agreement, where India and USA are also members. So many things are happening in our region. How we can, have a balanced policy in view of all these, and how we can translate our potential opportunities into real opportunities of trade and investment, that is very important. So various tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, reducing the costs of transport across the border. So many reforms we have to undertake in order to take advantage of the 21st century. At the border crossing, single window, interface of the systems, so that we have borders which are not control points, but crossing points. Various non-tariff barriers are also there. But I think that a number of, as I was mentioning, a number of major initiatives are there, and I think this is a very good moment for us to help realize those opportunities which are emerging, thanks to the various initiatives that our government is taking, Indian government is taking, the governments in the region are taking in the areas of transport connectivity and investment connectivity. Obviously will come along with transport connectivity. So my question will be to the Foreign Secretary. We know that Bangladesh, and I would like to request you to bring the Bangladesh perspective on board. How do we look at what we are now doing as we go forward, the various initiatives that the government is taking in the areas of trade connectivity, in the areas of attracting FDI to Bangladesh and also cross-border FDI flows, in the areas of trade facilitation, regional trading arrangement. So how do you assess what has been achieved, and what do you think, where should we move at an accelerated pace so that the initiatives that are being taken, we can take those to the logical conclusion and translate those into more exports of goods and services and also investment flows.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Mustafizur Rahman, for moderating this session and also for the introduction. I thank all the distinguished guests, scholars present here, and also my fellow panelists whom I knew from my Delhi days. Very good afternoon to you all. I feel privileged to be here today as a speaker at this session on evaluating the state of trade and connectivity in South and Southeast Asia. I sincerely thank the organizers for their efforts in mobilizing the resource persons to reflect on the current state of trade and connectivity in our region, which is very pertinent in the current regional discourse in South Asia and beyond. Esteemed audience, trade is one of the vital driving forces for the economy of any nation, and undoubtedly connectivity is a key to boost up trade. A well-connected region yields immense economic benefits for the greater regional integration, has already been proven in other regions. When we specifically look at the trade and connectivity mechanisms in Europe, we may draw inspiration. When we talk about connectivity, the entire prism of infrastructure development, people-to-people contacts, and subsequent economic development and its impact on the concerned region come to the fore. In this backdrop, we, as part of the government of Bangladesh, endorse the concept connectivity is productivity, and would like to mobilize public opinion through our tangible initiatives. Esteemed audience, despite commonalities in economic challenges, South Asia is least connected within the region compared to many other regions of the world, and Professor Mustafiz has already mentioned some statistics, so I don't want to go into that. Therefore, we are yet to reap the full benefits of our potentials as a region. This realization got further deepened during the past 2 years. The entire world experienced the menace of unparalleled pandemic, which brought the global connectivity and supply chains to a virtual halt. The ongoing armed conflict in Ukraine has also substantially strengthened our realization that without a well-connected region, sustainable growth is somewhat difficult, because sustainable growth is an outcome of the combination of multiple factors, including uninterrupted movement of goods and services. Distinguished guests, as you are aware, South Asian leaders had also come to a realization that we in the region need trade liberalization mechanisms in place in a synchronized manner for our own development. Countries in South Asia had initiated and implemented the trade liberalization process with the framework of SAFTA, although there are criticism about it, but it was an early realization to have something in place. As the countries in South Asia, including Bangladesh, are on the path of graduating to middle-income country, and some of the countries have already graduated, we are in the process of concluding bilateral preferential trade agreements or free trade agreements for trade expansion and greater economic benefits. We have already concluded a PTA with Bhutan, in an advanced stage of negotiations for PTA with Sri Lanka, and discussions for PTA with Nepal are on. In the same spirit of trade liberalization and protection of export of commodities, Bangladesh is about to start negotiations on comprehensive economic partnership agreement with India. Initiatives have been taken to ink PTA with Indonesia and FTA with Singapore and Malaysia. The MOU on cooperation on trade and investment between Ministry of Commerce of Bangladesh and Ministry of Trade and Industry of Singapore was signed just last week. The MOC would enable to explore the feasibility of a free trade agreement between the two countries. We are also in discussion with Japan to conduct a joint survey or study with a view to reach either a free trade agreement or economic partnership agreement, whichever fits the case. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to maximize our intra and extra-regional trade potential, the government of Bangladesh is also interested in the implementation of the sub-regional connectivity initiatives within the framework of Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, or popularly known as BBIN Motor Vehicles Agreement. And three signatory countries are in an advanced stage of finalizing the this motor vehicle agreement and the passenger protocol and enabling MOU. We are also negotiating to finalize the cargo protocol early, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is going to host the next round of coordination meeting of the BBIN in Dhaka. Distinguished audience, on the other hand, ASEAN countries offer potentials to South Asia as a big export destination and diversified source of imports as well. It is also encouraging that the leaders of BIMSTEC countries signed BIMSTEC Master Plan on transport and connectivity during the 5th BIMSTEC Summit hosted by Sri Lanka. The master plan is expected to facilitate connectivity between BIMSTEC members of South Asia and Southeast Asia, which in turn would lead to greater trade facilitation among the countries of the regions. In the same spirit, Bangladesh is looking forward to the opportunity of utilizing or to be included in the trilateral highway connectivity initiative being implemented through India, Myanmar, and Thailand, as was also mentioned by our moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, it is only natural or logical for us to promote and pioneer regional connectivity given our geostrategic location. Our Honorable Prime Minister at different fora offered connectivity in the form of transit and transshipment to our neighbors with a dominant goal of sustainable growth and collective prosperity of the region. The list of implemented initiatives for promoting connectivity is significant. Under the agreement on the use of the Chattogram and Mongla ports signed with India, we have already concluded 4 trial runs as provisioned in the agreement. A bridge over the river Feni in Ramgarh, Khagrachari, has been inaugurated earlier this year. The agreement in combination with the bridge would enable the landlocked northeastern region of India to have access to seaports, particularly in the context of full utilization of deep sea port in Matarbari. As I have already mentioned, our efforts on bilateral front for greater connectivity with the friendly countries of South Asia are remarkable. We have offered our maritime port capacity to Bhutan as well as through a bilateral instrument, and Bhutan as a landlocked country would also have access to seaports to the benefit of their transaction in trade with third countries. Bangladesh is ready to extend similar facilities to Nepal, another landlocked country in the region. Excellencies, let me mention that Bangladesh and India are enjoying connectivity facilities through inland waterways. We have this protocol on inland water transit and trade, which has not only contributed to the diversified transport mode for bilateral trade between the two countries, but also created an opportunity to expand these opportunities to Nepal and Bhutan by including them in the inland waterways routes through multimodal transport arrangements. Bangladesh and Bhutan are currently enjoying this arrangement. On the other hand, transit facilities extended to Nepal and Bhutan by India for the use of their territory to conduct respective bilateral trade with Bangladesh are facilitating bilateral trade of all these countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we have direct air connectivity with India, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Maldives in South Asia, and Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand and in Southeast Asia. To introduce greater connectivity options with our neighboring island nations, we are also taking initiatives to establish direct shipping lines with Sri Lanka and Maldives, coastal shipping link with Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, and MOU was just signed with Brunei on shipping services. I am repeating all these common information to drive home the point that with an intricate network among the people of South Asia and Southeast Asia, we really can develop seamless connectivity for the greater benefit of the region. Distinguished guests, The existing rail connectivity between Bangladesh and India has substantially contributed to the people-to-people contacts and trade facilitation, which is now being thought to be further extended to the extent of sub-regional connectivity, including Nepal and Bhutan in the near future. Discussions are on regarding power and energy cooperation among Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Bhutan through existing bilateral arrangements and new regional connectivity initiatives, and with the development of suitable infrastructural investment on cross-border energy grids, etc. We need early implementation of other initiatives like the Asian Highway Project, SASEC corridors, etc. We are also carefully looking at the potentials of the Big B initiative of Japan and Belt and Road Initiative, as well as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. We are very much on track to trade facilitation and regional connectivity as we have thought out the prospects and devising the appropriate policies. However, the Rohingya crisis and the political situation in Myanmar, a country that bridges South Asia and Southeast Asia, stand as an impediment to our aspiration for greater inter-regional connectivity. We believe that an early resolution to the Rohingya crisis through their dignified return to their ancestral homes is an essential element for realizing the full potential of inter-regional trade and connectivity. For implementation of the initiatives that are underway and on the table for discussion, political understanding among the leaders will remain a necessary prerequisite. Besides, harmonization of trade policies and services, though it might sound initially difficult, but would bring effective outcomes. And finally, for our success, we need the support from Track 1.5 and Track 2.0 initiatives with effective ideas and policy inputs through research activities, seminars, workshops, and symposiums of this kind. And I believe this conversation will add to our brainstorming efforts for crafting policy decisions on regional trade and connectivity. With this, I would conclude at this point, and I thank you all. Joy Bangla.
Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary, for those remarks. Very helpful, very positive, very forward-looking. And I think that you mentioned about Bangladesh's challenges. We are going through dual graduation. One is that we have graduated from low-income country to lower middle-income country in 2015, and we will be graduating from the LDC group in 2026. Both these graduations will have important implications as we go forward. And in that context, the initiatives that you have mentioned the government is taking, obviously with regard to the regional connectivity, BBIN motor vehicle agreement, our connectivity with East Asian countries, and also you mentioned about Japan and the Big B, Bay of Bengal integrated growth belt. So that is also becoming very, very important. You mentioned that there will be, Foreign Secretary, that the BBIN meeting will be hosted by Dhaka. But regrettably, the agreement was signed in 2015, and the standard operating protocols have also been finalized. But we are not seeing the sort of movement that is required for us, because you see, if we are graduating in 2026, we will have to make I think a very crucial transition.
We lost 2 years in COVID, we should not forget
yes,
that.
but then still 5 years. No, what I'm telling is that once we graduate, we will have to make a transition from preference-driven competitiveness to productivity and skills-driven competitiveness. And you have rightly mentioned about connectivity is productivity. So in that context, do you see that, for example, the BBN motor vehicle agreement, the meeting that we are hosting, is there any projection in order to have it move forward at an accelerated pace? Because when it was first signed in 2015, we were really hoping that it will significantly reduce the transport cost. Exporting from Bangladesh to Nepal is 1.5 times costlier than exporting from Bangladesh to Sao Paulo, Brazil. So that's something which is unacceptable. Our exporters are suffering, in terms of competitiveness. Our importers are suffering in terms of consumer welfare, raw materials cost, etc., etc. So, are you hopeful that this upcoming meeting will
Yes,
accelerate the pace?
We are always
please?
hopeful, when we started this, Bhutan was very much part of this architecture, but at some point they did some,
Yes.
practical,
environmental concerns,
and also infrastructural requirements or inadequacy or lack of it, and they kind of withdrew from this initiative. So while we are, having a bilateral discussion with Bhutan, so that at least they are comfortable with this idea and they also join. But we didn't want to wait for Bhutan to get ready. So when the Honorable Prime Minister visited Delhi in September, this issue was raised that Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, we should go ahead. And when Bhutan feels comfortable, they can always join. So in that spirit, we are hosting this meeting.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. I think that's the way to go, because this is becoming really important with regard to maintaining our competitiveness, both within region and also outside, because India has provided transit facilities to Nepal and Bhutan to use our ports, and there has also been a coastal shipping agreement as well. Now, India's name comes very frequently in this type of discussion, because India is a major player. India is also important in terms of our connectivity with East Asia. India, as the Foreign Secretary said, the trilateral highway, of which India is a major part, and Bangladesh has now requested to be included in the trilateral. So India's perspective is very, very important. India's policy of look east also includes Bangladesh in the way that it's geostrategic and geo-economic interests are seen from New Delhi. But at the same time, of course, new developments are happening. Bangladesh is a relatively small player in the context of what is happening in the region. For example, India didn't join the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which was signed, and it has 15 countries over there, but at the last moment India didn't join. But on the other hand, we are also seeing that India has joined the recently signed Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for productivity and partnership. So I would like to request Professor Bardwaj, since you have written a lot on regional and sub-regional integration, cooperation, collaboration. So how do you look at what is happening in the region in very recent years, and where do you see India's strategy in going forward vis-a-vis the elephant in the room? Obviously is also China. So how do you look at how it will play out, because we are also seeing that there is a subterranean, rivalry between China and India. India is not showing a lot of interest now in the Belt and Road Initiative. Once we had a lot of interest in the Kunming to Kolkata, the BCIM economic corridor. So in that context, are you hopeful about deepening of sub-regional and regional cooperation between South Asia and East Asia and also ASEAN? Yes.
Thank you, Professor Mustafizur Rahman, the Chair, and His Excellency, the Foreign Secretary. And thank you again, the Foreign Secretary has made my task very easy, bringing and raising number of issues. If I understand South Asia, the core determinants, or you can say that structural and functional aspects of South Asia. The interstates in South Asia determined by two core factors: cultural identity versus religious construct. I would say the cultural construct versus religious construct. The cultural constructs bring the South Asian neighbors closer, and the religious constructs are basically distancing us from each other. The second is, of course, the small state syndrome, the fear psychosis, because India, it is an Indo-centric region, India is a regional power in this region, and so the small state fear psychosis versus the regional power or asymmetric relations that had dominated the South Asian relations. Of course, India has three clear-cut policy objectives vis-a-vis South Asian countries. My focus would be Bangladesh more, and connecting to the first policy objective is, of course, security, the internal and external security. The second is very important, the economic development. That economic development, and India had understood that economic development cannot be achieved alone. You have to take your neighbors into your developmental boat. You have to connect, you have to bring them in the developmental boat. And of course, the third is very important. Again, India is also looking forward to have political stability and liberal democratic regimes in the neighboring countries as we are having. You know, Bangladesh, as other countries, is part of common ecological organic system. We cannot think separately. We have to think. It is our complex interdependencies that is forcing us to think together. Apart of shared historical cultural ties, Bangladesh is the largest developmental partner of India, fastest growing economy in the region today, and of course the largest trading partner of India in the region. How India is looking Bangladesh and how Bangladesh is very important, that India has three policy options. One is that Look East policy that has been initiated in 1991. From Look East, we had transformed during the Modi period. This is Act East policy. And now we are looking forward Connect Asia policy. And in Connect Asia policy, Bangladesh has become linchpin, or you can say gateway, or you can say a bridge between connecting with Southeast Asian countries, with South Asia and Southeast Asian countries. And I think that India had started emphasizing about taking Bangladesh into the developmental fold. And number of projects that had been initiated with Southeast Asian countries, particularly I would say about Kaladan multimodal projects that is connecting with Myanmar to northeastern states, and of course the Tri-Nations road connectivity projects. And the good thing is that Bangladesh has also shown its interest to be part of this Tri-Nations connectivity projects between India, Myanmar and Thailand, and that is going beyond Thailand to Vietnam, that connecting entire Southeast Asian countries by physical mode. What is important aspect is that, you know, we had SAARC, we had sub-regional cooperations, BIMSTEC and all that. They are moreover in principle, but could not integrate ourselves very firmly. And this is the region that we are least integrated region in the world. But what happened in 2010, a comprehensive framework of cooperation for developmental agreement was signed between the two countries, India and Bangladesh. The Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina visited India, and the Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, and we have signed framework agreement, and I think that framework agreement has become landmark agreements for the cooperation between India and the other Southeast Asian countries. What was the aspects of that? All the bilateral initiatives and cooperations will be seen in the regional framework. And I think that BBIN, all these things are the product of, or the child of that, that all the bilateral initiatives would be brought in the regional framework. Of course, we will resolve all the bilateral issues through mutual understanding and cooperation. Mutual recognition of each other's concern will be, or critical concerns will be considered. And of course, the areas or the cooperation in areas of water, energy, transport, connectivity, and trade tourism would be taken care that can flourish the two countries' economy. And I think that landmark agreement has given a space that Bangladesh is doing wonderful, at least in South Asia or in the world. That is what the Foreign Secretary is talking, that is graduating towards the developing countries. In 2008, Bangladesh per capita income was around $300. Now today, Bangladesh is the I think that the leading country in South Asia has more than 2,100 per capita income. That's doing wonderful because of the cooperations. What India had made significant policy shift to bring particularly Bangladesh and other countries into fold. First thing, that India used to think in the sense of reciprocity, that we will have reciprocal relations with each other. That reciprocity has converted into non-reciprocity. That is the one thing, that number of significant agreements, land boundary agreements, Ganges water, or I would say that was also signed, and other agreements were signed. The second is, of course, that what we used to think about in the bilateral framework, this bilateral framework had been transformed into multilateral framework of cooperations. Like, suppose we are talking about the water, their water we will not think, we will not cooperate bilaterally, we will have a regional or basin-wise approach to, particularly in 2010 JRC meetings that has been divided, that we will take basin-wise approach to address the water issues. The third, very important, that India used to have a unilateral approaches in dealing number of issues of making dams and all, or barrage and all that, and a number of other issues. That unilateralism had been transformed into the constructive unilateralism, that we will come and we will be partner in your development and we will extend whatever we can do it. And there what happened, what we are talking, that the aspects of resource nationalism, that your energy, is your energy, my energy, and I will utilize my energy, that would not work. That resource nationalism had been transformed into the resource sharing formula. Let's Bangladesh use Indian land to go to Nepal and Bhutan, and let's Bhutan and Nepal can use Mongla port and Chittagong port, and India also can utilize Chittagong port. And that kind of resource nationalism, the principle had been adopted by the two countries. I think that framework agreement that has taken place there. And because of that, you know, that line of credit, 4 line of credits had been extended to Bangladesh, particularly to develop infrastructures and deepening strategic partnership between the two countries, road, transport, railway, inland water, a number of agreements you can see the progress. Implementation progress is also, I can see that in October 2021, there were the evaluation of the connectivity and the line of credit projects, that the first line of credit in 2010 covered 15 projects, and out of 15 projects, 12 projects had been completed, and 3 projects are very close to be in execution. The second line of credit was extended to 2015. 2 projects have been completed so far, and the other projects are into the progress. The third line of credit was extended 2017. So I'm just giving you that around $8 billion line of credit had been extended to that, and that had brought the South Asian countries there. We are thinking about border hearts, that let the border peoples, border community can utilize the Bangladeshi goods, and the Indian community can utilize the Indian goods. Infrastructure projects, you know, you can't imagine that in 1965 we have stopped. Today we have 5 rail connectivity projects. I want to go to Khulna, I will go by road, I can go by train, I can go by flight. Anyway, I can reach from India, from Kolkata to Agartala. You know the way we had started integrating ourselves. Economies has been integrated. Once India and Bangladesh will integrate, it is not India is integrated with Southeast Asian countries. Entire South Asian countries will be integrated with these countries. In fact, the last point I would like to make before you know, there are 3 mindsets of people are here in South Asia, and I would say particularly in Bangladesh. that there are one section is, I term them is the liberal sections, the progressive liberal sections. They believe in civilizational affinities, they believe in principles of coexistence, they believe they are basically progressive, democratic, cultural peoples. They believe in integrations of all that.
Thank you.
This is one set of liberal people. They are in Bangladesh, in substantially in South Asian countries also. The another, and they finds India and India as a friend, or they, in India they friends Bangladesh as a friend. The second set of people are, I term them, in my writing I term them as radical and conservative people, and they have parochial class interests. They are very dogmatist, they are very chauvinist, and they believe in that it is Hindu India, it is Muslim Bangladesh, it is Muslim Pakistan, it is kind of construct that has been, they have been dominating the discourse. That is the second construct. And the third construct, I believe, is in the realist, that realist or rationalist. And I term them, the realist and rationalist are moreover the young generations. They do not believe all these issues. I'll just wind up last. They do not believe on all these. They believe profit, they are profit maximizer. They believe in equity, fair distribution. They need a smartphone. They need a good job, good education, good health service. They do not believe you are integrated with China or you are integrated with India. Anywhere you are getting opportunities. These young generations had supported the government in 2008. The government came into power in 2008, and after 2008, you know, Bangladesh is become a role model of development for the South Asian countries. My point is there that unless until we will not have developmental approach for the development, you can't integrate yourself. Market-based approach would not help you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for...
Thank you, yes. Professor Bardwaj. I think those were very, very good and very forward-looking, I think, remarks, and I think our audience have also has also appreciated your very positive approach. And you are very right. Resource nationalism is not the way to go forward. It will have to be win-win, and we must identify those win-win solutions. Obviously, there will be problems, and we will have to find constructive solutions to those problems, obviously. And Bangladesh-India bilateral relationships, you are very right, that can be a foundation of our deeper integration with other regions. So it should be leveraged so that both of our countries can benefit from greater integration within the region. And your suggestions with regard to how the young generation, you know, their perspective, obviously, they don't have the historical, you know, burden. So they want to go forward. And I think that security in this 21st century, economic security, I think is one of the foundations of all securities. So if we can give our people economic prosperity, that will also solve a number of security concerns that we have. So thank you very much. The organizers are rushing me, but I would like to be guided. Zillur, should we conclude here? No audience participation, no questions, okay. So I will be guided by the organizers. We are a bit in a hurry. Our foreign secretary also has a very important meeting right now, so he will also have to leave, and the next panel will also start. So I'm very sorry as the moderator of the session that I was not able to give you any opportunity to ask our panelists. You must have some questions. I also have some questions. But let us take this message forward that this is 21st century, and this is a century of very variable geometry. So there will be bilateral relationship, there will be trilateral, there will be regional, there will be sub-regional, and we will have to make those work towards a peaceful, prosperous, inclusive development. So that is the message that I would like to take from this session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
our next session is a plenary session, and the topic is creating a bottom-up demand for good governance. And for that session, I would like to request on the stage Mr. Faris Hadrovic, Business Development and Government Relations Professional, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dr. Bodiul Mojumdar, Secretary, Shojan, Bangladesh. Jyotinder Pal Singh, Software Engineer, Entrepreneur and Activist, India. Sheila Tasnim Haq, Senior Governance Specialist, UNDP, Bangladesh. Dr. Abdullah Al Mamun, Research Director, Center for Governance Studies, Bangladesh. And Mr. Mamun Rashid, Managing Partner, PwC, Bangladesh. And he will be acting as the moderator. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Hi everyone, good afternoon to each one of you for being here. For the interest of time, let me put the house in order by agreeing on some discipline issues. Each of the panelists joining here or esteemed panelists joining here will be allocated 4 minutes time for each one of us or you, and then I would like to open the floor for around 5 minutes or so to take 1 or 2 questions. And so make the announcement. Okay. So I'll write down the name, and also after that allocated 5 minutes, we'll come back to the panelist again, and I will try to allocate precisely 1 minute time for each one of us or each one of the distinguished panelists. So if you have gone through the booklet made available for today, it says all about corruption. While we are talking of the creating synergy at the bottom of the pyramid, or also making the growth work for all of us, by making where Professor Mustafizur Rahman has ended, making the growth inclusive, making the growth acceptable and enjoyable by all in the entire value chain. So this is very important. So to me, it is not all about corruption. To me, it is more loudly making growth work for all of us, and also through transparency, accountability, and making an engagement, all-out engagement from all the stakeholders is from the value chain is of paramount importance. So joining me today to discuss about creating a bottom-up demand for good governance is Faris Hadrovic, Business Development and Government Relations Professional, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dr. Bodiul Mojumdar, quite known. So Dr. Bodiul Mojumdar, I cannot see. Is he changed? He was supposed to be here, isn't he? Usama Khalili, Development Expert and Management Consultant from Palestine. Sheila Tasnim Haq, sitting next to me, Advisor Political Governance, Democratic Governance Cluster, UNDP Bangladesh. Dr. Abdullah Al Mamun, Chairman, Department of Japanese Studies, University of Dhaka, and Research Director, Center for Governance Studies. So I'm very happy with all of you joining us today to talk about this creating a bottom-up demand for good governance. So yes, how do we elaborate good governance? Very simply and very briefly, this is all about transparency and accountability through better engagement throughout the value chain of growth trajectory. So, and how do you handle corruption in a developing economy or a transition democracy that we get to see? And yes, now they are talking of engaging more of technology. They are talking of more creation of more accountability at the bottom of the pyramid, engaging the civil society forum, engaging the NGOs, engaging the polity in the rural places to make growth more accountable, to make growth more transparent. So this is how you fight out corruption with more loud engagement from all stakeholders possible in the value chain. Good governance is not confined to one type, and the type of governance offered does impact on how the community engages with it. Global support measures become more effective if decision making and implementation are locally embedded. They can be helpful in identifying people's interest, mobilizing public opinion in support of this interest, and organizing action accordingly. Therefore, when correctly applied, the bottom-up approach can lead to added value because of greater commitment of stakeholders and a greater scope of innovation, which manifests itself in improved social and human capital, which includes features of social organizations such a build-up of local identity, development of new skills and capacities that facilitate coordination and cooperation for mutual benefit and make the community more resilient and adaptive to changes. Improve local and multi-level governance in the implementation of the strategy, which comprises participatory decision making through which public, economic and civil society, as I have mentioned at the very outset, stakeholders as well as local people articulate their interests, exercise their legal rights and mediate their differences in a collaborative manner. Improved participation, which is more adapted to our digital times and more resilient to political instability, thereby making policies more responsive to changes in the way governments, multinational corporations, NGOs, trade unions, foundations, and philanthropic organizations, experts in academia, and think tanks can interact or should interact. So this could be a kind of a, just to put up the house in the right direction, I guess, and more to come from my esteemed panelists. And may I please start with Faris Hedrobic to speak his mind for 4 minutes max, and then if time permits, of course, we'll come back to him again after taking 1 or 2 questions from the audience, esteemed audience present here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. A very relevant topic worldwide, not just for South Asia and Southeast Asia. My experience is from another Southeast region, particularly, and that's Southeast Europe. I've been based in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a very unique country, very far from here, but a very complex political system that has produced a very complex form of governance as well. Multiple layers, which has, of course, also opened doors for a variety of loopholes and finding ways of doing business different ways. I think that the overarching point is that both the private and also in terms of my background, I've worked with international organizations. I headed a UN agency as well. I've been in the corporate private sector. I've also worked with startups as well. So I have a wide range of experience to attest to some of these issues. The private sector and civil society in general share a common desire to establish a society that's based in fairness and shared codes of conduct. So that in general is the starting point. An important point is the identification and prevention and also prosecution of corruption, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector, which is often a party to corruption. Civil societies also play a very important role. Organizations such as Transparency International are active worldwide. Our international CSOs, in partnership with local CSOs, have pointed out to a number of issues, potential measures that could be taken, and cases of corruption around the world, including in the countries that I've been active in, and I'm sure also in Southeast Asia as well. As an example, Transparency International has also worked with civil society, but also business organizations, so that in Slovenia, where I also spent some time working, they worked with the private sector through what was called a Business Integrity Forum, and which brings together different companies and stakeholders that are interested in cooperating and exchanging of good practices with the aim of achieving prevention of illegal and unethical practices in the business environment. You also have the United Nations Global Compact, which is a worldwide initiative, a document that was launched as part of an effort to integrate business efforts in the fight against corruption. It's the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, and it calls on companies to align their strategies and operations with universal principles of human rights, labor, environment, anti-corruption, and also to take action to advance societal goals. You also have initiatives such as the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which is the most global of all initiatives or treaties. And it contains both preventative but also punitive measures. When we talk about corruption, we generally think about corruption in the private sector, but corruption is endemic in both the private and public sectors. And often they work hand in hand, and they harm each other equally. Private sector accounts approximately 60% of global GDP. And some of the measures that have been suggested, measures in terms of promoting cooperation between law enforcement, developing standards, promoting transparency, preventing the misuse of proceeds and procedures, preventing conflicts of interest, and ensuring auditing controls. As time has elapsed, I mean, there's a few other points, but I'll let the other speakers as well.
Thank you so much. I would again request all the distinguished panelists to contain within 4 minutes time to create opportunity space for others. Thank you. So may I now go to very esteemed, distinguished Secretary General of Sujon, Bangladesh, Dr. Bodiul Alam Majumdar, to speak his hearts.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I wasn't here when my name was called. Well, as I was reading the description of this session, how can the civil society of South Asian nations develop call for action plan for engaging private sector in an inclusive, accountable, and corruption-free system of governance? And there are several very heroic assumptions behind this session. One is there is civil society in a country like Bangladesh. And there are some voices, but are there really civil society in Bangladesh? That's a serious question. The second question, something can be done to involve the private sector. That is also a big heroic assumption. And the third assumption is it would really matter. Whether or not we raise the issue or call for action, it would really make a difference. And so these are some of the questions that arose in my mind. Anyway, so if we have to address the question, we'll have to first understand and realize what are the mechanics of corruption, especially big corruption. Basically, big corruptions happen as a result of the nexus nexus between a section of businessmen, or women for that matter, and a section of politicians, and a section of bureaucrats. And also, that's because of lack of accountability. The other thing is cronyism, the policy of cronyism that we have been pursuing. So those are the sources of corruption. And in Bangladesh, there has been the politicization of business and vice versa. Rajnitir ব্যবসায়ীকরণ, ব্যবসায়ীর রাজনীতিকরণ. As a result, none of these are going as well as they should be. And the business is not really governed by rules of the game. And they are governed by the other factors, the power factors, and the patronization they receive. So really, in fact, we know that in many countries, after period of primitive accumulation, there has been demand for rule of law, and there has been demand for governance system, transparency and accountability, and enforcement of contract. And none of those are necessary here because there is the rule here. And everything is, all the business is governed by connections and the power they enjoy, and all the other considerations they have to pay or receive in return. So then what do we do about it? What can we do about it? Again, we'll have to, in fact, this state of affairs basically linked to the governance system as well as political system. They are linked to the democratic deficits. There's no accountability. Democratic deficit arises in two ways. One is downward accountability to the voters after every 5 years. And parallel accountability through the institutions, the checks and balance system. And they don't work. And as a result, and the other is obviously transparency and accountability, they don't function. And we do not need those things. They are broken down. So if we have to really do something about it, then we'll have to really make sure that there is a rule-based system. And we have some basic elements of transparency and accountability in place. The rule of law, the human rights, transparency, accountability, and the participation and all those things. If we do not do that, and most importantly, I'll finish with this sentence. Most importantly, if we do not have a downward accountability system, and in other words, after every 5 years, our elected leaders who patronize these so-called business houses, and if they don't have to come to us every 5 years and beg for our votes, the system will continue. So, and also, if there is no really civil society, and there has been systematic way to make the civil society relevant and disappear, basically. We are a disappearing breed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Majumdar. Yeah. In every possibility, we'll come back to you to also deliberate your rest of the thought process, of course. So now, may I please go to Mr. Usama Khalili, development expert and management consultant from Palestine. So Mr. Khalili, please, and if you could kindly contain within 4 minutes precisely.
I'll definitely try to do my best, yeah. Well, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. My name is Usama Khalili. I'm from Palestine. I also come from a faraway country like Faris, but not as far because we're still in Asia. I come from the Middle East. And when I was invited to talk about corruption, I was very happy, but I was saying to myself, like, oh my God, every time I do that, I get into trouble. So let's try another time. Well, I mean, when you want to talk about corruption, basically what the narrative says is that
We need laws, we need policies, we need enforcement, we need accountability and control systems, which is actually true. But if all of this does not have the support of leadership and leadership willingness to actually support all of these, then this is actually worthless. When it comes to Palestine and the issue of politics, corruption takes a different path. Corruption in Palestine is, I mean, of course we have administrative, we have financial corruption and everything, but the worst part is having the political corruption, which is what's doing all the damage in Palestine. Now, the way this corruption started is because how our leadership came to Palestine, it was based on grounds that were so susceptible and so supportive of corruption. And unfortunately, this has impacted our daily lives on every level. So, not just in Palestine, I mean, this happens all over the world, but when you talk about corruption, ruins everything, ruins all the services in terms of health, education, infrastructure. And we've been talking about democracy a lot this morning and yesterday, and we can't really dismiss that. The thing about corruption is that it also forces all the qualified people in a country to just flee and go seek a better quality of life somewhere else. Now, this is also a problem. One of the things that I came across while doing my master's dissertation about corruption is that how former Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, said that if you want to get rid of corruption, you have to do it just like you're cleaning the staircase. You know, so you have to start from the top. And this is basically a great way of doing or trying to clean corruption. I mean, this is really the best way to go about it. Now, the way they've done it has done great things, and other leaderships following Lee Kuan Yew followed the same path, and this has impacted their lives on multiple levels, which was great. And actually what they have done is prove what Confucius said 2,500 years ago, is that, you know, if the leadership is not corrupt, then who dares to be corrupt, which is really great as well. Now, in Palestine, it's very difficult for us to work throughout this political corruption era that we're going through. But the worst part about it is that this corruption is not giving a breathing space for people, and we need to work together to make a difference on the ground. Thank you very much, and I hope we get a chance to speak later.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khalili, and thank you once again for remaining within the 4 minutes stipulated time. So now may we please come to Ms. Sheila Tasneem Haq, Advisor, Political Governance and Democratic Governance Cluster, UNDP Bangladesh. Again, I'm sure you don't need to be requested further.
Oh, thank you so much. I wish addressing in 4 minutes, of course, is a challenge, but addressing the corruption and accountability in 4 minutes would be a further challenge. So let me sort of now sort of concentrate on how UNDP here and globally addressing those issues. We believe that this engaging state, civil society, and the private sector, and the national, regional, and the global level, from the 2030 agenda, and also particularly looking into the whole status of LDC graduation, especially for this region, along with Bangladesh, Nepal is also graduating. So it's very important to take it into account, this whole issue of inclusivity. And also we have seen the challenges with the COVID and ongoing crisis in Europe, the whole development challenges, where also we need to think about looking into the industry, commerce, health, education, climate. This is all emerging issues, not in this region, but beyond the region as well, the whole Asia-Pacific region and beyond. Also, I think that transparency and accountability is one of the corruption a key to achieve of the SDG goals, especially SDG 16. We also believe that poor governance, corruption are a major bottleneck for going with the development in the Asia Pacific. It creates a drive more issue of not exclusion, poverty, and also the growing inequality that we see across the globe, especially in the region as well. So coming back to corruption and the measures and the issues that we are focusing from UNDP, let me also bit of a shed, I'm looking at the time as well, on the economic diversity, the issue that is also being discussed among the different panelists. Because when we talk about the private sector, when we talk about the different marginalized group, if we look into the very localized SMEs and small medium enterprises, bring them into this whole discussion is also very important. With us is for UNDP, technology innovation is another front line for us to look into the whole corruption and other accountability issues as well. Because technology gives also, with the 2030 agenda, it gives a chance to look into and bring technology into that dimension, but also create a scope to think about how technology can also sort of impact going forward. So we also believe that 2030 agenda that talks about leaving no one behind. We also talk about marginalized population and others. We also believe in engaging youth in the different anti-corruption discussion and also the governance in general. On the anti-corruption issue, UNDP with the Anti-Corruption for Peaceful and Inclusive Society Global Program is also harnessing the benefits of digitalization and innovation in anti-corruption efforts to maximize the impact of development financing, which is very important. For us, on the UNDP Anti-Corruption Initiative, we are taking in the African region and on the Asia Pacific, especially Bangladesh and Nepal. We are sort of working with the government, the state, bring the civil society in looking into the grievance redressal mechanism, because we believe that the state and the citizen, the demand and the supply side needs to go hand in hand. So grievance redressal mechanism that we have been working and piloting in Bangladesh in different parts, and also trying to sort of engage our different offices in Nepal and other South India countries, and also the Asia Pacific regions. It's important to see how the grievance redressal mechanism could bring in different issues, the complaints, the grievances from the lens of the corruption, and also going on the different other development agendas as well, which is very important on the inclusivity, accountability, and transparency. If you look into the SDG 16, we talk about peaceful and just society. So I'm looking into the timing as well, but I'll end with that. I think that our work regionally, globally, and the Asia Pacific regions talk about more often making a more effective, responsive institution that addresses the needs and desires and aspiration of the citizens. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tasneem Haq. So now may we go to Dr. Abdullah Mamoon, one of the distinguished panelists here. Dr. Mamoon, please.
Thank you. I make sure as a host and as a good football player, I don't have the red card from my moderator. World Cup is going. Let me try and try to be very brief. First of all, this panel, in fact, and the perception admits that corruption in South Asia exists. Maybe level of corruption varies, but it exists in South Asia. I was going through the literature and the available data in doing my web surfing, and I tried to outline the commonalities between South Asian countries in terms of corruption and that ultimately create injury to governance. 5 points I'll highlight. One is the lack of access to information on how the government are performing overall and implementing development project in order to hold government accountable. My second finding is lack of whistleblowers and a meaningful protection for the existing whistleblowers like Dr. Mazumdar. And my third point is the indemnity and protection to government officials and politicians is commonly a problem in South Asia. And the fourth one is a widespread political interference in the work of anti-corruption agencies and judiciaries that make them very much ineffective. And the final point is allegation of corruption also exists against the anti-corruption agencies and unfortunately to judiciary. So these are the 5 points I tried to highlight from the existing literature. Unfortunately, one of the major areas when we discuss about the South Asia, its nature of corruption, as well as the existing practice, we, in the public forum, particularly omit the issue of the corruption in development project, and particularly the role of the development partners, which has been agreed in many international forums, particularly in Paris agenda, or in Accra, or in Busan. And the 4 principles are now driven by the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, which includes that the principle of ownership, alignment, harmonization, managing for result, and most importantly, the mutual accountability. Unfortunately, the money is coming from the donors, but historically they blame the inability of the recipients. But at the same time, huge amount of money has been invested as a component to development project as well as to technical project, but the outcome remains very trivial. This is one of the common scenario, regardless of India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, except Bhutan perhaps, that the development finance are coming. The lack of accountability is highly whistled by the development partners, but we didn't really pose a question to their integrity, whether the right formula is in place to check the accountability measures, whether the right formula in place that makes the government compelled to bound to have proper audit, proper procurement. And unfortunately, due to the political rhetoric of aid, development partners, of course, they like to raise their flag everywhere and try to maneuver the system. Perhaps that is one of the reasons of the existence of corruption in development projects. So with this, let me conclude, because this session likes to move forward with some recommendations for the South Asian countries to work together. My first recommendation would be to enforce the right to information. The second one should be to develop a comprehensive mechanism for the whistleblowers. The third one, the free and fair corruption investigation. And the fourth one would be the appointment of judges and anti-corruption people through an independent body across all South Asian countries. And finally, development partners should take some responsibilities to eliminate corruption. Thank you. I'm on time.
Thank you so much. I must be the odd man out. I'm sorry about it. So at this stage, I would like to open the floor for 5 individuals to raise their opinion, or more importantly, question. And question should be very pinpointed. Who do you ask the question to? You must speak it out. And then whoever is answering the question from my distinguished panelists, sister and brothers, they will get 3 minutes time, and other panelists will get again 2 minutes time to speak rest of their hearts. Thank you so much. Ibrahim, please.
The moderator, Mr. Mamoon Rashid, is a distinguished younger brother of mine in Fordarat Cadet College, and we know most of you on the panel. Compliments for your excellent deliberations. Now, Mr. Badir Alam Majumdar, Dr. Badir Alam Majumdar said it's a nexus. Now, who corrupts whom? That's what he exposed. Now, who will uncorrupt or decorrupt whom? You therefore need a membership of honest people, meritorious people, courageous people in the decision-making process, in the decision-making level of the state and the government. How do you bring it about? Because the very process by which people are selected to be leaders is corrupt. So it's like the about 50 years old doctrine of the cycle of poverty, somebody said. Because of low savings, you have low investment, therefore low production, therefore low savings, you have profit. Same. Now here everybody is corrupt. When you face a situation like that, how do you begin? Where do you begin from? That's what I'm just trying to raise a question. It's not a question, it's my feeling. Maybe we all share it. Because none of us are in an environment where you can feel so comfortable. Nobody is the best doctor here. All of us are patients. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, General Ibrahim. The next person, next gentleman, sitting behind General Ibrahim. Please, 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, sir. I am Colonel Ashraf, retired principal of college. My question is from the heading of today's plenary session. Your banner heading was creating a bottom-up demand for good governance. My question is very specific. Creating demand to whom and how? Particularly, I'm not talking about Bangladesh. There are too many countries, corrupt countries, but to whom are you demanding when everybody in the government tells lie day and night? They are maniac. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, please.
My name is Sarwar Hossain. I am a practicing lawyer in the Supreme Court. In your discussion, nothing mentioned about money laundering. Money laundering is the biggest problem the country is facing now. Why does that money laundering takes place, and what is the actual remedy? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes, please. General Amsamin.
বলবো হ্যালো একদম মুখের কাছে নিতে হয় Ibrahim, my brother, I am also veteran diplomat and a veteran political worker, politician, whatever you say. I think most of you have done a good job by identifying corruption as the original sin. Is it? The original sin? The comment I'll make is like this. My friend from Palestine has rightly said all those things, which I'm just going to highlight. The original sin is not corruption, is not governance, is not human rights, is not poverty. So what is the original sin? Politics. That Mr. Osama had said. I want to repeat that forcibly. In entire South Asian region, and my friend also asked why to begin. Begin with politics. Unless you have the leadership that others have shown, like in Southeast Asia, like in Singapore, like in South Korea, the quality of leadership, honesty, integrity of leadership. Unless that can be brought about by changing the political culture. What is that culture? Political culture of crime, corruption, and violence. They don't allow you to speak like they don't allow Mr. Osama to speak in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, General Amsamin. Anyone else? I have got space for another question. 1 minute, please. This lady, please. We must take one lady at least.
Thank you so much for including a female voice at least. But of course, I would like to talk on behalf of the young generation as well. My name is Shahrin. I'm coming from UNDP. Would like to emphasize on enlightening the youth participation in terms of addressing the corruption for the next generation. I have been going through the background notes, of course, all the impressive speeches from the speakers and panelists, but of course, how we would like to go ahead in our next generation in coming days to address and achieve the 2030 agenda, how the South Asian or specifically the country-based young generation can play a crucial role keeping their hands in hand with the government, the civil society, the private sector. This is very enthusiastic group of people, would be very prompt in for the betterment for the good governance. Thank you so much.
So much to all the distinguished audience who has posed all this question or observation or comments. So I may conclude from my side that yes, you said it all. Politics, corruption, creating more accountability, creating more transparency at the bottom of the pyramid, getting all the stakeholders engaged in this eradicating or fighting corruption process in our part of the world. And I would also end with our colleague from UNDP, that this esteemed lady, that yes, how do we engage the youth apart from technology that Ms. Tasneem Haq has rightly mentioned, that and we get to see now large corporations trying to fight corruption, internal corruption, and ensuring more better governance. They are often submitting to technology solution building like IoT, like blockchain, like new technology and others. And also, it remains typical to every growth nations, every emerging democracy, every transition democracy that yes, without all-out participation, inclusively more from the youth, because they are the voice of the emerging nation. So how do we engage them? And also where my another brother has ended, that he has politics being creating all the wrongdoings, and how do we fix the politics side of it? And if politics can be fixed, I guess crony capitalism can also be fixed. If crony capitalism can be fixed, I also think that money laundering or pervasive money laundering can also be fixed. Of course, we do have someone like Dr. Bodiul Alam Majumdar, who has been always championing the causes of fighting corruption, ensuring better governance, ensuring more accountability, not only at the bottom of the pyramid, also wherever growth should work and wherever growth is being challenged through pervasive corruption. So, Dr. Bodiul Alam Majumdar, if you could kindly focus on the question of money laundering, question of bad politics, question of crony capitalism, and of course end up what you could not finish within that stipulated 4 minutes time. Thank you so much.
If I have to answer all these questions, it will take whole afternoon. There is no quick fix, obviously, and we'll have to have a series of changes. And those series of changes will have to begin with recognition of our sovereignty. All power belongs to us in a sovereign state. And the sovereign people transfer part of their sovereignty to a group of elected officials who are supposed to act in their interest, in the interest of the sovereign people, and in a transparent, obviously, and accountable manner. Now, the transfer of power will have to be through voting, and voting will have to be free and fair. And then the people who are empowered through voting, and the nature of power is that that power always gets concentrated and misused. So we need institutions. We need constitutional institutions. We need to fix those institutions. We have statutory institutions. And we also need to fix those statutory institutions, appoint right people, and have them do the right things. And then who will ensure the accountability of all these constitutional and statutory institutions? It's the non-state actors. It's the civil society. So we'll have to have a strong civil society. So we need a series of actions, or series of activities, or series of changes, series of initiatives, which will bring an end to it. And it will obviously, we'll have to start with what is called political will. If we want to make a change, then things will change. If we don't want to change, nothing will change. And if nothing changes, if the way it is going in our country, we are talking about Bangladesh, if it continues this way, then it will be probably a collective suicide for all of us, because this will only lead us to a situation which will not serve the interest of anyone, and which will be really bring about changes that will be unwarranted and unexpected and would be devastating for all of us. And so I think we need to wake up, basically. We citizens will have to wake up if we want to change. And only if citizens wake up and citizens begin to demand change and act, then only will change. Otherwise, I don't see any hope for change. Thank you. I finished on time.
Thank you so much, sir. May I now go to Ms. Sheila Tasnim Haq, that many of you, and including the veterans who General Samin and General Ibrahim and valiant freedom fighter, so they have focused on creating accountability in the growth process, the overall growth process. So any addition from your side, that how do we create further accountability or acceptable accountability in the entire growth process, including what UNDP has been driving all along since its inception?
I think that's a very relevant question. It's very important at this time when we are sort of having certain milestone as a country on the LDC graduation, of course, as globally with the 2030 agenda. So I think that when you talk about the inclusion on the whole economic front and creating transparency and accountability, it's very important again to be inclusive. We talk about youth participation, we talk about marginalized groups. Equally, we also need to engage from the private sector, the small, medium enterprises, to be part of this process as well, which will ensure that the voices has been heard and it is part of the policy reform agendas. Again, like, coming back to what we do from UNDP, we are also supporting on the economic governance and the policy reform program. We have recently established a research and analytic unit, which with the BIDA, which is a Bangladesh Investment Development Authority. It's a small one-stop shop, but also research analytic unit, which help us to understand the whole economic, the climate of environment of the economic development, which is very important. If you look at the discussion, our previous panel was talking about the BIMSTEC, the regional initiative, SAFTA, which is also questioned, but again, these are the regional framework that we have. So how to utilize the regional framework and looking into the whole issue of the ASEAN countries as well, going forward. I think that's also important for Bangladesh to look at the whole accountability mechanism, not only from the regional and the global and the national perspective, but also the global perspective as well. So I think that making it very specific and short, and I think that where we need to sort of really look into on the whole economic transformation journey, again, I will emphasize the SDG 16 and also SDG 5, SDG 13, which talk about also the climate change as well, SDG 13, which is also very important. If you look in the whole development trajectory, if we do not really address the risk and the fragility, the climate vulnerability is increasing, not only this region or Bangladesh, but globally. It's very important that we talk about the carbon emission, we talk about again on those whole issue of how we bring in the voices of the marginalized, voices of those people who are sort of been deprived or who are being sort of displaced of the climate vulnerability as well, which is very much linked with economic development in the journey for Bangladesh and the region as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tasnim. She has brought in the subject of climate vulnerability, and we have seen the cyclone shelters being made and all the ladies being put up to the first floor without having any toilet facility in that cyclone shelter. So we have also seen how the social safety net programs are not being participated or delineated with the participation from the people at the bottom of the pyramid or the NGOs in action or even the civil society forum or the local polity itself. So now may we go back to Dr. Mamoon. I was very impressed. Let me share that he has with his very precise 5 recommendations, which does include that he has say how do we make judiciary accountable, even how do we get more loud participation from our development partners. Where is the money going? What is popularly known as aid effectiveness, or the making the end use of the aid or development support work for all the participants in the broader value chain. Dr. Mamoon, if you could comment on this, how do we make growth work, and by making judiciary more accountable, by making polity more accountable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You see, the reason I brought that issue of foreign aid and linked that with today's session is one of the methods of understanding in terms of utilizing aid is that it reduces the pressure from the government to mobilize resources. There is debate, of course, with the utilization. And if we take the perspective of Bangladesh, currently 37% of our development endeavor or development budget is dependent on foreign aid. And if the theory I said a moment ago that aid reduces pressure from the government in terms of revenue mobilization, but it is very much subject to the political will. It is very much subject to the will of the government, whether they have the right bent of mind to utilize the resources properly, of course, with the support of the government. One of the issues, I think, historically we are arguing about the strength of our economic institutions, including planning ministry, including ERD, our IMED particularly. We always pose questions to their ability. But the argument I put forward about the donor support, it should be argued that it is known to the government that how best the aid could be utilized. And I'm very happy to have a colleague from UNDP. I know they are endeavoring for many years to promote aid effectiveness agenda. And unit was set by the name of Aid and Development Effectiveness Unit in ERD, but I don't know the current fate of this unit. What I know that government officials travel a lot. They attended in many seminars and symposium with the money came from the development partner. Mustafa Sir is one who was my respondent in my PhD as well. So I had a detailed chat with him. But this has to be addressed. And second thing, I would like to highlight that what came from the audience about the engagement of the youth. I think I also fall into your platform as a youth that we should not lose our hope. And thereby I like to bring forward some of my points as food for thought for this panel as well as for the audience. If I ask that how many of the young talent, particularly my students at Dhaka University, are doing profound research on corruption or transparency, the scope is very limited and due to the fear factors of the teachers' politics as well as the political umbrella of the university. Second, but thereby it is very important to research, to identify the gaps and advocate the policy from the grassroots level to pressurize the government and understand the frustration of His Excellency about the government initiative. Second point, I don't see the space of ethical education in our education system. Where is it now? Bodhil is sitting here. Sorry to be emotional, I'm taking maybe 30 seconds from you. There's no space of ethical education and religious education in this country. And thirdly, I agree with Bodhil that it has to come from a bottom-up approach, and of course, led by the young and energetic students and the young force of this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So may I now go to Mr. Usama Khalili. We have heard General Hamza Amin very loudly, politics being put on the dock, as well as corruption, and also crime. So what is your takeaway, what Mr. General Hamza Amin has mentioned, and also he did try to take the clue from you, what you have spoken before.
Yeah, well, I totally agree, and thank you very much for your note. Let me tell you a fact about Palestine. Now, we have been living under occupation for the past 70 years or so. That's the modern occupation. We've been occupied for more than 400 years, okay? But the thing is that if you ask Palestinians in the street right now, which is worse, is it the occupation or corruption? You would be surprised. People are hurt on a daily basis by corruption. Corruption is killing prospects for healthy living and future of Palestinians, unfortunately. The occupation is the ugliest thing anyone can live through or under. That goes without saying. But politics and political corruption in Palestine had made things even much worse. Now that's the problem. And if I want to go to some of the comments that were raised, I mean, sir, you were talking about who corrupts whom, okay? And I tell you, it's a human nature that we're all weak. Everyone can corrupt anyone, okay? The thing is that it all goes down to the system that we are living within. We're all susceptible, we're all weak, okay? But we need to put a stop to it somehow. Absolutely. I mean, COVID was just for a period. This has been going on and it will keep on going on. Absolutely. I mean, and I don't know who asked about what do we do with it. Well, simple. We have to treat corruption as if we're talking about a person who went into the emergency room who's bleeding, okay? We have to stop the bleeding. That should be our first priority. Then we can look into why and how things happen, and then we can do all the research that we want so that we will not fall into this again, you know. But we have to cut off the bleeding, you know. That's how we start. We can't be soft when it comes to corruption. We have to take extra measures, we have to take tough measures, you know. This is how it worked in Singapore and other places around the world. The law needs to be applied without any reservations or exceptions. That's the thing. That's how we go on, you know. Because, you know, I mean, let me also talk from the bottom-up approach, okay? We're talking about people, random people in the street. I believe in the saying, give people what they want, okay? And people simply want to live better lives, okay? And they cannot do that under the tyranny of occupation, because occupation is just awful. But when you want to flavor occupation with corruption, oh my God, I mean, I can tell you, I'm living that on a daily basis in Palestine. I can tell you one thing, I mean, it's not going to go away easily, and we need to work together, and we need to start bottom up, because the leadership will not just say, well, I've been wrong, okay, let's try to make things better. So we need to be tough about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So now, may I go to Mr. Ferris Hedrubik, that yes, you have heard all of us here, basically the esteemed panelists, that yes, poor governance, polity, business nexus in a developing country or an emerging economy. So how do we handle it? In the emerging part of the entire world, that yes, how do you handle this emerging corruption, emerging hobnobbing between the political parties, party in power, as well as the corrupt businessmen?
Thank you. That was a fascinating example we just heard from Palestine. I can also draw a parallel, in, which is perhaps mind-boggling for somebody from Bangladesh, a country of 170 million people. Bosnia and Herzegovina is about 3.5 million people. On that 3.5 million people, we have 14 governments. So we have 3 parliaments. We have over 150 ministers in different levels. So you can imagine the complexity I mean, it's a result of a war and being set up in a particular way. But it's also, so it's very conducive to corruption. But it's also another way of preventing political corruption in other levels of government. So there's checks and balances in a way. It's a very complex system, it's a very expensive system, and it's a system that doesn't breed progress. As a result, we have significant immigration, particularly of the youth, into western parts of Europe. And for a country of only 3.5 million people, when you get several 100,000 youth that are leaving, it's a significant blow to a country. And most also cite corruption as one of the primary reasons why they leave, because there's no perspective, there's no future. It's jobs and opportunities are only through connections, and so on and so forth. Now, what can you do? Well, one of the simplest things is to simplify things, to simplify procedures, to simplify governance, to make it more transparent and easy and accessible and acceptable and understandable. That's number one. Number two is to install measures. You have to, criminalize corruption. First of all, you have to define it. What is corruption? What are forms of corruption? Because people don't necessarily always understand what is corruption. You have corruption, we have, for example, corruption in the medical sector as well, where people pay their doctors to get preferential treatment. And they don't, you talk to people, they don't consider that corruption. They think it's just, it's a way of me to, you know, get a preferential treatment and treat my doctor so I get better service. So that's also very important to define it so that people know what they're doing is actually corruption, that they're supporting it. So it has to be criminalized. The bribery of public officials, of international public officials in international organizations, trading in influence also needs to be criminalized and defined as well. And laundering, somebody mentioned money laundering, so laundering the proceeds of crime also. Those are, I think, the primary 4 things that could be done in terms of promoting transparency and combating corruption.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hadrubik. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end. To lighten the situation a bit, we have talked so much about politics, nexus between bad business and the possibly bad politics, and also the failure of the institutions. So here comes that on a further lighter note, don't take me so seriously, because political science was my subsidiary in my undergrad. So, but there was a saying that a lot of our professors used to at least teach us that yes, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there is no, if there is no effective parliament, if there is no process of hearing the voices of the marginalized, that Ms. Tasneem also re-emphasized on continuously, and also creating an opportunity domain for all of us to share the growth or success of growth equally, and being participated by all of us in the entire value chain of the growth trajectory, that unless that can be created, we cannot make growth work for all of us. And thereby also corruption will remain to be discussed in the times to come. Thank you so much once again for being with us, and at least for committing each one of you towards getting into a more corruption-free society or economy or economic decision-making process. Thank you so much. Sir.
Next, we have a plenary session on the topic, Refugees of the Times, Past Precedents for the Ailing Present. And for that session, we have with us Ms. Gwen Lewis, UN Resident Coordinator in Bangladesh, Simon Kofi Tete, Business Analyst and Consultant, WHO, Malaysia, His Excellency Ambassador Waliur Rahman, former Special Envoy to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh and Distinguished Fellow, Bangladesh Heritage Foundation, National Security and Counter-Terrorism. His Excellency Mustafa Osman Turan, Turkish Ambassador to Bangladesh. His Excellency Osim Troste, German Ambassador to Bangladesh. And the session will be moderated by Mr. Irfan Yar, founder, Afghanistan Security Institute. I would like to request all the invited guests to the stage. Thank you.
Hi, Gwen. Sorry?
Hello. Am I audible?
No, no.
Perfect. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, Namaskar, and hello everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Irfan Yar. I'm the founder of Afghanistan Security Institute. It's a small think tank based in Canada. We are focusing on Afghanistan and US relationship. Today, it's an absolute honor to be moderating this session, and I'm sharing this panel with our distinguished panelist, Acem Tosta, German ambassador. We have Mustafa Osman Turan, second to my left. We have Gwyn Lois, UN resident coordinator. We also have Ambassador Waliur Rahman. And last but not least, we have Simon Kofi Tete from WHO Malaysia. And I welcome you all. Thank you for being here. For this session, we will have just a housekeeping announcement, 15 minutes. And distinguished speaker, I will pose one question to each of you. And if we could keep the limit to 5 minutes maximum, that will be greatly appreciated. And audience, I would really need your help in this by paying attention to our distinguished speaker. And of course, in the end, we will have a question session, so feel free to get your question ready. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, we are facing an unprecedented refugee crisis. According to United Nations, there are more than 32 million refugees. And this is not just a number. Every one of these refugees has stories. Before I proceed with the agenda, I would like to know if there's anyone in this audience or panel who has spent a life in a refugee camp. If there is, please raise your hand. Any refugee here? Well, I'm the one, so I could represent refugees. I was born in a refugee camp. I grew up in a refugee camp, and now I have the honor to, speak on behalf of many other refugees. So it's going to be a very interesting panel, and we would love, again, to have your attention. So if you could please reduce the noises, it would be much appreciated. Thank you. ladies and gentlemen, tragedies such as the genocide of Rohingya people, the conflict in Afghanistan, the conflict in many other parts such as Syria, other countries in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America have further exacerbated the refugee crisis. Some countries are willing to accept refugees, some countries are not willing to accept refugees. So we have a very, we are facing a big dilemma. And to discuss this crisis, we will pose some questions to our distinguished panelists. My first question is to you, Your Excellency Mustafa Usman. According to the 1951 Refugee Convention, I think every state is responsible to share, I would call it, burden of refugees, which is not burden in long term, but anyways, they need to share this burden. In Turkey hosts some of the biggest number of refugees. I think this is the most significant number of refugees that the country is hosting, which is 3.7 million. And after Colombia, Germany is the third largest host of refugees. We also have some other countries, for example, Pakistan and now Bangladesh, who are hosting refugees. Their acceptance of refugees is really commendable. However, this comes with a price that these countries are paying. So my question, sir, to you is, how would you assess the current refugee sharing burden? And what are the challenges that the host countries are facing? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question and the introduction. I agree with you when you said, the refugees, when we talk about refugees, we talk about numbers, but those numbers represent human beings. And each one of them has a story, and each one of them go through very difficult experiences as a refugee across the borders, fleeing conflict or persecution or whatnot. So, and we should also not forget that each one of us in this room can turn into a refugee, maybe in a very short period of time, just because our country can go into war or get affected by natural disasters. So being a refugee is not something that we should think is a distant possibility for any of us. I'm saying this because we need to develop some level of empathy, and that's exactly countries like my country, as well as Bangladesh, and all those who are hosting significant numbers of refugees have somehow developed that empathy towards refugees. They pursued a certain amount of open door policy when, even when the influx of refugees were in high numbers, such as the one in Syria, which started 11 years ago. And currently we are hosting, as you said, 3.7 million Syrians. We have more refugees. It goes up to 4 million, and there are some other nationalities in that figure. And when you look at how long refugees stay in a country, unfortunately, that number is very bleak. I think the UNHCR has made some calculation, and refugees typically stay for long periods of time in countries where they receive protection. And that's what happened in my country. It's been 11 years. We've been trying to address the political process that would bring peace and stability to Syria through various diplomatic means. But unfortunately, so far we were not successful. And in the meantime, obviously, the refugees need shelter, need food, need education, need health services. And all of this cost a lot of resources to be shared with the refugees. My country alone spent, without the foreign assistance I'm talking about, spent $40 billion US to take care of 3.7 million Syrians in the last 11 years. So that's a lot of, resources. And obviously, you talked about and asked about burden sharing. We have had a deal with the European Union in 2016. According to that deal, there would be a certain level of burden sharing. Some, resources were committed, but there is always a problem in the delivery of those resources when it comes to burden sharing. For example, most of those resources are spent by financing the activities of aid organizations. Like the percentage that goes directly to the refugees is rather less, much less than what is promised. And also the pace of the delivery of burden sharing is always much slower than what is needed. So there are all kinds of complications, and the deal that was struck with the European Union at the time also included a lot of other elements which were also remaining unfulfilled until today. So there are always political considerations, and what I was really sorry to see was, there is also some level of discrimination when it comes to refugees coming from this country or that country, depending on their background, whether they are Muslim or Christian, whether they come from this ethnic background or that ethnic background. Countries sometimes apply discriminatory practices, even if this is not allowed by the international human rights standards. Each refugee is a human being, as I said in the beginning, and if we talk about human rights, we have to treat them equally and fairly. We have seen a lot of tragic images on the shores of Aegean coast of my country when refugees were pushed back, and treated very inhumanely sometimes. So I think being a refugee is not an easy thing, and burden sharing is very complicated. Bangladesh is asking for burden sharing and receiving only partially what they need, both in political terms as well as financial terms. There is a plan every year that is prepared. Only 50 or 60% of it are financed through the donor resources. Obviously, every day there are new priorities on the international scene, which reduces the amount of resources that are allocated to the Rohingya people. So it's a very complicated story, and my country is doing its best to alleviate the burden that is put on many different countries. We are named as the most generous humanitarian donor in the world, spending 0.8% of our GDP for humanitarian assistance since the Syrian conflict started.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your insightful remarks. And as I mentioned, please, a big round of applause. Ambassador Truster, your country, Germany, is also the largest recipient of refugees. In Islamic world, we say Muslims are brother among themselves. And if you look at some of the richest countries in the Gulf, they are not accepting any refugees. It's in fact our Christian brother, I would say, in some other nation like America, Europe, specifically Germany, they are accepting and welcoming refugees. So how would you analyze this kind of, dilemma? I understand they do contribute to, let's say, UNHCR, but accepting refugees would be also, something that they could show sympathy toward their brothers who are suffering. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, let me point out that the Federal Republic of Germany stands wholeheartedly by its humanitarian commitments. We do this out of a very deep and sincere conviction because of humanitarian considerations. We really stand by the humanitarian principles, and I think this is also a lesson that we have drawn from the past. We, in the 30s and 40s, had a dictatorship in my country, the Nazi dictatorship, and the most brilliant heads were very happy to be accepted in the US or in neighboring countries. So we feel a great gratefulness and also an obligation out of that. And we, as well as my dear colleague Mustafa has pointed out, we see in every individual, we see a human being that has its natural human rights, and of course its needs, and that have to be provided for. So for us, I'm repeating it, the humanitarian principles apply without any limits. And we don't distinguish between where you come from, which beliefs you adhere to. For us, everybody is a human being with all its human values. Since, even though we are under heavy economic strains after the Russian attack on the Ukraine, we are still at least considered a rich country. I think we have a special obligation to do more than others. And so I would not point out at others who could perhaps do a bit more than they actually do. Well, of course, in the international realm and frameworks, we try to plead for a more equitable burden sharing. That, of course, but we do not have an approach that is mainly guided by this. But on the other hand, at the end of last year, Germany gave shelter and home to approximately 2 million refugees and asylum seekers, and after the Russian attack on Ukraine, 1 million people from the Ukraine have been added to that. So we have 3 million refugees in Germany. And of course, only a look at the newspapers, mainly also at the region newspapers, is sufficient to see that also a rich country like Germany is coming somehow to its limits. We don't have refugee camps. We try to give everybody a shelter in apartments and houses. But of course, also Germany may reach somewhere, I cannot define when there's the point, but reach the limit of its capacities. And that's why we also have been pleading within our own realm, which is the European Union. We have been trying to reach for a, in our point of view, more equitable distribution of refugees. But you know this, if you're here in Bangladesh, it's an extremely sensible point, perhaps one of the most sensible points in foreign policy. And this is really a long haul, and it needs time and patience, and we are not yet very far.
Oh, sorry about that. Gwen Lois, one of your key roles here as UN resident coordinator is to coordinate all the UN efforts to cooperate with the Bangladesh government in the context of 2030 Sustainable Agenda or Sustainable Developmental Goals. And as you know, we have a massive number of refugees from Rohingya people here. So when you coordinate the UN efforts, are those efforts sufficient? What are the challenges that refugees on the ground are facing here? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. I just wanted to also come back to the point that you made at the beginning, that there are 32 million refugees in the world, but they're out of 100 million people who are displaced globally. So in addition to refugees or displaced people who are facing conflict situation, we're seeing increasing numbers of people displaced by climate change, and it's really unprecedented, very, very dramatic, and as a result it's also becoming more and more difficult to find durable solutions for people, for refugees, for displaced people. So I suppose just to answer your questions, there's really three broad areas of agreement and work that we're doing with the government of Bangladesh. Maybe to start by saying that the first point or the first principle is that the solution to this crisis is not with Bangladesh, it's obviously with Myanmar. So we are continuing to work in Myanmar in terms of the UN work on the ground in order to find ways to create a viable and conducive environment for return of refugees. So the work that's been done on the ground is to establish programs and projects in order to support the conducive return. We also have a special envoy on Myanmar, Nolene Hauser, who has had a recent visit and who is lobbying with the Myanmar authorities. We also have to obviously rely on ASEAN, to rely on China and India and regional partners in order to exert pressure and to lobby with the Myanmar authorities. And we hope that over the course of the next year, with Cambodia's leadership of ASEAN, we'll be able to see some more efforts in that regard. The General Assembly, the Security Council have also increased their efforts. But all of these political efforts really need to continue and to be reinforced because we're not seeing the changes that we need on the ground. The second area of work is really looking at how we ensure the safe return of the Rohingya to Myanmar. It doesn't only need to be safe, but it also needs to be voluntary, and the return ideally needs to be sustainable. So we're doing a lot of work with the refugee community and the government looking at teaching children the Myanmar curricula. We have already 250,000 children enrolled in the Myanmar curricula, for example. We're doing a lot of skills development, so when people go back, they have jobs and they know how to work and support their communities. And so there's a lot of efforts being done in that regard in order to really help the refugees when they go back to have skills. There's 20,000 volunteers in the camps at the moment who are working on various support measures for their community, and these are also skills that they're requiring to go back home. The third point, and Mustafa and Akim have already pointed to it, which is really Bangladesh is not alone in having to deal with this crisis. Bangladesh has obviously taken the burden of the response and the responsibility, but the international community and the UN were here to support. And that support is obviously for the refugees living in the camps in Cox's Bazar and Basan Char, and that funding is very important. But there's a huge amount of effort and work that's also being done with the host communities and to support the communities in Cox's Bazar in order to make sure that the burden isn't really as heavy on them. Things like replanting, reforesting, 3,000 hectares of land. There's been work to build a hospital. There's been a lot of infrastructure investment from the World Bank and ADB. So a lot of those efforts will continue to try and support Bangladesh as well as the local host communities and the refugees. Finally, maybe just to finish by saying, not very hopeful note, but the context is very difficult at the moment globally. Increase in food prices, competing crises like the Ukraine or Afghanistan really make it very challenging to fundraise. But we are really, really committed to make sure that the support continues and to continue to advocate politically for the refugees.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Waliur Rahman, to you. So before I come to Dhaka, I was very much involved with refugees communities, and some of them were mentioning that there is a sense of double approach toward different refugees. I mean, refugee is a refugee, be it from Africa, be it from the Middle East, or be they from Ukraine. They should always be treated equally. In some countries are, for example, welcoming generously Ukrainian refugees. It's great, they should. But this generosity is not offered to, let's say, refugees from Africa, from Afghanistan, or from Syria. And I feel this should trouble every right-thinking person here. What are your thoughts on this discrimination to treat different refugees differently? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. co-panelists, friends. In 1971, during our War of Liberation, I resigned from the Pakistan government in Geneva and I became a refugee. And I spent 9 months as a refugee till the time of our independence. Then from 73 to 75, I organized the transfer of not refugees but people, Bengalis in Pakistan and Pakistanis in Bangladesh. Their transfer through the support of the Red Cross, Swiss Red Cross, or ICRC actually. Now, in the case of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh, it's a very peculiar system. We don't call them refugees. There are problems. There are reasons, you understand. It gets us into some additional responsibilities. Now, in 73, if I may go back, we had about 300,000 refugees in Bangladesh. So, in 76, 77, some responsibility was given to me, and I succeeded in getting them out of Bangladesh exactly from the same place, same area, with the support of the Organization of Islamic Conference, OIC. Now, how I did it, that's a very different story. But today, it's I call it a double hazard. They have been here. Number is increasing. And we see no hope of their going back. Our meetings with the Myanmar, the Burmese government have been very negative rather. They're not responsive. So this is and on top of that, I think the organizers have mentioned here, the Ukraine, the Soviet, beg your pardon, Russian invasion of Ukraine, has impacted on the support that we were getting from our very kind, distinguished donor communities, because a lot of support is being transferred there, and quite understandably so. So for us, if I have to speak as a citizen, a conscious citizen of my country, serious efforts have to be made by international community. My friends are here, important people, and how the efforts will be made, that has to be recognized by them, because Myanmar situation is increasingly getting complicated to us as Bangladeshis. Unfortunately, some of the countries which are our friends, including Russia, they are the largest supplier of arms to the Myanmar junta. And there are many other countries. I will not take the names now. I will take your time. But then the point is that if we do not make concerted efforts, how we have to do that, perhaps the donor community will understand that. It's an impossible thing for a country like Bangladesh to take them, to rear them, to feed them. But then on top of that, as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, has said very well, and rightly so, this is becoming a security problem for Bangladesh. It's not a humanitarian crisis anymore. It's taking a dimension of its own as a security problem. So that is my problem. That is my concern, that at the moment we are keeping them okay. Some shots have been, some people are being shot dead, some Hezbollah was shot dead, and a few people are running away from here and there. But then this, to bring this to a conclusion, we need concerted efforts by all those friends who are sitting here and outside to come together and to make sure that A, to stop supporting, as the Americans have done very well. The ambassador said yesterday, I'm so proud of him, that they have stopped giving any such support to Myanmar regime. So all the donors, the countries who are supplying arms to Myanmar junta, they should make a public comment, public statement to the people of the world that we are not supporting the junta so long as they do not take back the refugees, the Myanmar citizens from Bangladesh.
Thank you very much for your insightful remarks, even though we did not get our key point, what we wanted, but thank you again for your answer. Very briefly, Ambassador Troster, statistics shows that 72% of the refugees are coming from countries such as Syria, Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Ukraine, in South Sudan. And what I see common in these countries as the conflict, in some ways, either it is West or East involved, they are the direct part of this conflict that drives the refugee crisis. And at the same time, these countries are supporting refugees. So I believe there seems to be very short-term, strategies curing the symptoms of refugees. So why don't international community at all end the conflict so there will be very, very less refugees? The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I think the underlying assessment of this question is that we do not enough to settle the conflict and to bring them to peace. Well, of course, as a member of the German Foreign Ministry, I'm of course pleading for my home that we do enough. But if you look at the international level and all the institutions that we have that are really set up for conflict settlement and also for prevention, I think we're doing already quite a lot. And I think the gist of the question is perhaps a bit above the political realm, because it points to the very nature of mankind. Let me just remind us that currently 23 UN missions are underway, and they are not in countries where peace and prosperity reign. And if you only look at the sphere of the OSCE, the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe, we still maintain more than 13 missions in different European countries. So I think we are really doing quite a lot. With regard to, and I think the gist of the question is also why are we not as successful as we wish to? But this points a bit, I think, let me become a bit philosophical to the complexity of problems and also to the question of evil. I think in the last in the last wars that have been triggered off, there's also that we have seen a lot of trials to prevent these conflicts. Yesterday, the chief guest said he could not have remarked any single undertaking. I don't know what he has been doing before the 21st of February, but I may only remind that my own foreign minister went 2 weeks, I think, or 10 days before the Russian attack to Russia and was really seriously asking Russia what it was about to prepare, and the answers were not really in concordance with what happened afterwards. You may term that as you may. So I think it is extremely complicated, but at least with regard to the humanitarian system, with the UN and also with the German setup, in the last 10 years, a lot has been done to shift from let me say, just remedying and delivering humanitarian aid to come to the prevention side. In my country, a lot has been done. In my own ministry, a whole department has been set up that is exclusively dealing with very concrete projects that come along with all the UN undertakings. Well, of course, I completely admit the successes are not as we wish them, but I think that has really underlying causes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We have our last panelist, and the concluding question that I would put for him is, how would you see the refugee crisis, let's say, in the next 5 to 10 years? Will they increase or will they decrease based on your experience that you have with the UN? Thank you. Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, based on the outlook and the current trends, I see the refugee issues to be decreasing based on two things. One, it must be emphasized, or the background for people to become refugees are mainly war, persecution, violence, conflict, and then a natural disaster like flooding and all that. And situations that are happening recently, for instance, the meeting between President Biden and Xi Jinping, which are the top superpowers in the world, shows there's going to be a cordiality. And I see that cordiality to be able to impart even Russia, to be able to talk to Putin in Ukraine. So I see that kind of cordiality between President Biden and Xi Jinping that happened recently in Indonesia to be kind of a positive outlook for refugee situations. And I would not be surprised if President Xi Jinping started talking to Putin. Secondly, climate change, because I think that is the part that many people don't know that can cause refugees as well. Because with drought and flooding and famine happening around the world due to climate change, people will have to move from where their countries to another, because if there is no water, there's flooding, there is no drought in your country, you cannot survive. You have to move to another country in order to survive. So people will flee with this. And with the current climate change conference on COP27, I see a lot of seriousness and commitment among all the countries that were represented there, that we have to be serious with climate change. And climate change can have impact on the life of all of us. Tomorrow we can wake up and there will be flooding here. We will have to be relocated somewhere, and that will cause us to be refugees as well. So with these two issues that happened, these two global recent issues, I see the outlook to be very positive and good. So I would rather see refugee situations to be, in the next 5 to 10 years, to calm down a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. We hope refugee crisis come to an end, but if we have people like Putin, I'm very pessimistic that the refugees crisis will come to an end in the near future or reduce. But anyways, please join in thanking me, our distinguished panelists. But before that, just very quick, 2 questions I would like to take from the audience. The man at the back, please. Sir. If I could let him, okay, go first. Okay, after him, you may ask your question. After, sir.
I've got a very simple question, sir. Question is, thank you, Irfan, for moderating this session, and thanks for giving me the space. My question is directed to Ms. Lewis and Ambassador Oliver Rahman. Is there any, I'm a layman on this topic of refugee. we are not calling the Rohingyas as refugees. Is there an implication on that, the treatment or handling of these illegal, so-called illegal migrants from Rohingya?
Thank you for your question.
I get puzzled with this definition of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can take another question and then come to answer the gentleman in the back seat.
Okay, thank you. My name is Emmanuel. I'm from Ghana. I have two quick questions. The first
It shall be one, please.
Okay. Then I would ask on the UK sending refugees to Rwanda. I want to know your thoughts on this phenomenon, because I think that if it's allowed, other countries will follow suit, and it may not be the best path for refugees. Thank you.
And that question is addressed to whom?
The panel.
Anyone on the panel who would like? Okay, got it. Can we accommodate just one more question maybe to the gentleman there?
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Zahid Khan. I just have a quick question, and thank you, Simon, for bringing the climate refugee issue here. Actually, the picture is not that rosy. According to the United Nations study, United Nations University study, by 2050, there will be around 200 million climate refugees. Sadly, we do not have any international instrument which grants this climate refugees a refugee status. So my question to you would be, what you and also the UN resident coordinator have in the plans of action to promote the idea that climate refugees should be included into the international law regulations. And I'm also intrigued to see two Excellency Ambassador from European Union, Europe, not European Union.
From Turkey.
Yeah, from Turkey and Germany, who have been the champion of hosting refugees. But we also have examples in Europe where ships full of people are not denied to enter. So in a collective way, what Europe can do to sort of normatively influence countries like Italy where things are happening like that.
Thank you for your question. So I thought they got the question, I believe, yeah. Just if you could respond only if in 40 seconds, I know that will not justify the answer, but we really have to be strategic given the time limitation. Okay, first question was to you, sir.
So Bangladesh has never adopted the 1951 Convention on Refugees, meaning that the status of refugees is not recognized in Bangladesh. So the main significance of that for the Rohingya is that citizenship rights or national identification is more challenging. But Bangladesh has opened their doors, obviously, in terms of humanitarian support. They have followed the principle of non-refoulement, so refugees can come in safely and have facilitated taking care of 1 million people. So in many respects, a lot of the principles have been respected. And then we have technical issues in terms of which agency is in the leadership of the response, and I won't get into the specifics of that, but that's why the refugee status isn't in place in Bangladesh. Maybe I can reply on behalf of my colleague on the. I mean, I completely agree with you. I'm a little bit less optimistic than my colleague. I do see the situations of refugees and displaced people getting worse over time. There's been a huge amount of efforts at global level in order to address and try and put in place better systems and support. There's the Global Compact on Refugees, the Global Compact on Migration, and Bangladesh has taken huge strides in terms of policy frameworks and legislation in order to make sure that people who are migrating from Bangladesh because of climate issues are protected when they're traveling, are assisted, but also that there's support in place in the countries where they go. There's also efforts, because people aren't only crossing borders, there's people who are displaced within countries, and there's huge issues around increased urbanization, people having to live in slum areas. So that whole category, there's a new compact not a compact, there's a special panel on internally displaced people, looking at durable solutions, looking at protections and assistance. But fundamentally, the principle here is prevention, and looking at ways we can do better whether it's national adaptation plans and financing. I'm also less optimistic than my colleague. I don't think COP was actually what we wanted. It's very positive that we have a loss and damage fund in place, but ultimately the commitments that we need to reduce carbon emissions were not really met. And so we have a lot of work to do and a lot of support that is needed in Bangladesh to meet the mitigation and the adaptation targets.
Thank you. May I?
Okay, sounds great. So to conclude, I think the distinguished panelist touched. Okay, yes, please. This is what I asked. Thank you, sir. Yeah, briefly, please.
The question, as far as I understood, was UK's policy of sending refugees to, like asylum seekers to Rwanda for out of a deal that they, yeah, is that the question? Oh, yes. No, this is a, I think, I don't know the specifics of this agreement, and I mean, there was a talk in the UK that the UK, the former Prime Minister of UK mentioned a similar scheme of sending asylum seekers to my country, similar to Rwanda, and we, my ministry has made a very, very clear statement that this is against international law. It's the asylum seekers who apply for refugee status need to be protected until their asylum applications are processed. And they should stay in the country where they seek asylum. Obviously, out of political reasons, externalizing the refugee issue by exporting it to other countries is not a solution. And the deal that we struck with the European Union back in 2016 also foresaw a provision that would relocate some of the Syrians who were sent back to Turkey because they went to Europe through Turkey. We agreed to take them back with the condition that there would be a regular channels through which they could be relocated in European countries. This has not been implemented. So let alone receiving refugees in a regular fashion, now some of the European countries are trying to export them to other countries like Rwanda and offering, you know, some financial resources for it. This is not the way to go. I think when it comes to human rights, the standards and, you know, the principles related to refugees is an internal part of the human rights framework internationally, and applying human rights on a selective basis and ignoring the human rights of the refugees is not the way to go, according to my government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we here have three men. I'm really, okay, please, but please be brief.
General Karim, thank you. I have consulted on this very question my two professors, Professor Ian Bromley and Professor O'Connell. And they both agree that under circumstances relative to situation like Bangladesh, a country which has its own problems, we do not necessarily have to give them the status of refugees. But then we have accepted the formula, the law, the legal responsibility of the principle of refoulement or non-refoulement. We have accepted that, the principle of non-refoulement. Therefore, under those circumstances, they are here, and our friends are assisting us to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So here we saw that conflict and the climate change are the key drivers of refugees. And there should be also a more enhanced and a more cooperative international system to handle this refugee crisis. So please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists. A big round of applause. Thank you, Your Excellencies. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to request our panel member to come forward for a group photo. Now we will go for a tea break for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we will resume our session. We will go for a tea break for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we will resume our session. Thank you.